Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and today I'm going to be showing you what I have been getting up to with Inktober. I've decided to go along with the official prompt list this year. I am having a lot of fun with these prompts and it is helping me have fun with my art supplies and learn how to use these inks that I've been wanting to experiment with without there being quite as much pressure. There's kind of an understanding with Inktober that it's okay that each piece isn't amazing because you're doing a piece every day. As I'm sure you are aware, the first prompt of the month was ring, and I have decided I would like to do a fantasy theme for all of mine because I love fantasy art. That's kind of my thing. And so I decided that a fairy ring would be the obvious choice for this one. I adore fairy rings, I adore toadstools, I think they're so magical and they bring a little fantasticalness into real life and I really enjoy that. And so for this piece I used my microns, what are they called? Pigma microns. And I pretty much used the 0.05. And that's what I've been using for a lot of my pieces this Inktober. And then I filled in some colors with my gel pens. And I've also been kind of doing minimalist colors with these pieces. So only a few colors per piece a lot of times. So I only did red on this one. And then we have day 2, the prompt for which was mindless. I had to think a little about this one, but fairly soon I was reminded of a quote from my favorite series, Deltora Quest. The last line of the quote is, "Mindless will to serve the hive." And this is in reference to a bunch of little flies who swarm in a particular area of Deltora, which is the name of the country. They as a whole make up a monster that our heroes have to contend with. So what I decided to do for my piece is a bunch of flies all gathered together. These flies are colored red, and this bunch of flies is rising up in front of some sand dunes. When the flies die, there are so many of them, they make up giant sand dunes. And the living flies rise up through them whenever they want to attack something. And so for this piece I used my Copic markers. I did a little bit of blending between some orange and 2 of my reds, and then I used my micron pens over the top to add some shading and some details to make it kind of look like it was a swarm of flies and not just a big red S. And for that piece I used my marker paper, and for all the pieces that I'm not using my markers on, I am using just regular sketchbook paper. So that's why I'm dealing with 2 different pieces of paper, but I am keeping my illustrations small enough that I can put several on the same page. Because I'm doing them every day, I am keeping them simple, and also because I have another project that I am working on that you will get to see hopefully this Saturday if I can get it done in time. And it is a very big my style piece, so I'm working very hard on that whilst doing this every day, so that's why they're particularly small. So then we have a little vampire piece, and this one was inspired by both the prompt bait and also Greatly Geeky's theme of the week, which was horror monsters. And so I decided to do a piece where Dracula was being baited with a little box and string and stick trap with some jelly-filled donuts underneath, because there's a joke about that and I thought it was cute. Also, his cape is a lot more sparkly than I intended it to be. I did not realize how sparkly my sparkly gel pens are. They are very sparkly, so I'm excited to use those more. Then we have the prompt freeze, and that one reminded me of the Pixie Hollow movie, or the Tinkerbell movie, where Tinkerbell meets her sister and she's a frost fairy, and a bunch of frost fairies end up putting frost on plants to protect them from a deep freeze. And so I decided to draw a few hands that were putting frost on a pretty pink flower. And this was quite a silly decision of me. It wasn't a brave decision because I just didn't think it through, because I'm not very good at drawing hands. So they're not so great looking, but I did my best, and I do like how the flower turned out and the little sparkles that I put around it. I think those really added to it and made it look a lot nicer than it did before I put those on. Then we have the prompt build, and for that I decided to reach back to the Del Toro series and decided to draw the builders of that story. So one thing that's interesting about the Del Toro series is that Emily Rada comes up with a bunch of different creatures and races that inhabit her world, and one of those races are the Rallied people, and the Rallied people are the great builders of the country. They build all the castles and great cities and beautiful things. And they are short and skinny with blue skin and tufts of red hair. And they love to play the flute. And I really enjoyed making that and reminding myself of how much I enjoy those stories. Then we have the prompt husky, and not very creatively, I decided to draw an actual husky. A lot of people did, so I don't feel too bad about it. And I decided that the next thing I wanted to practice ink-wise was how to shade with pointillism, which is just shading with dots. And so that's what you can see me doing here. I'm not great at it, but I do feel like I am a lot better at it now than I was before I did this piece, which isn't saying much because I was really bad before that, as you can see from my mindless piece. So I did learn some things from here. I'm still pretty terrible at shading rounded things, just in general, let alone with pointillism. So that's why the wings look the way they do. So they are basically just dotted outlines of wings. But I do feel like the actual shape of the husky and the different colors on his fur really came out. So I'm glad about that. And the reason he has wings, of course, is to make it a fantasy piece, when otherwise it would have just been a regular husky puppy. And I did have to go over it several times, adding more dots at different times to make the contrast more significant. And that way I learned a lot about using dots, because I am glad that I went back over it at different times instead of trying to do it all at once. And then I gave him blue eyes for that little bit of color. Then we have the prompt enchanted. I was struggling a lot with this one because there were so many things I could do. It's such a fantasy word. There were so many different things I could do to fit it. And for a while I thought I would do a Beauty and the Beast castle. So instead, I decided to do some fan art of a simpler castle, and for that I decided on Howl's Moving Castle. And this castle is particularly enchanted because it's not actually a castle, it's only enchanted to look like a castle. And it has doors that lead to different places depending on where you've turned the dial to, and there are invisible walls, and it's all supposedly made out of coal, which is held together by magic. And so I took absolutely forever doing the design on this to look like sort of cobblestones, trying to go for that cobbled together chunks of coal look. Although while I was working on it, I had visions of black and white giraffe print, which I'm really not a fan of animal print, so I didn't like that very much. But oh well. And also the towers were sort of blending in a lot with the main walls of the castle, so I decided to add a little bit of gray glitteriness to just the walls so that they look slightly different from the towers, and I think that turned out pretty well. So here you have it, all 7 of my Inktober pieces so far. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Bye!